Hello everyone, this is Ben, and today we're going to look at a Task 2 IELTS Writing. So let's take a look at the question first of all. When a country develops, but don't blame me. I do not make these questions. When a country develops its technology, the traditional skills and ways of life die out. It is pointless to try and keep them alive. So I think what this means is many people argue that it's pointless to try and keep them alive. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this opinion? So kind of from one of the IELTS Cambridge books, which of course are very good because, Cambridge is involved in developing the exams. So they're pretty trusted when it comes to making IELTS textbooks and that kind of thing. And the practice tests from the Cambridge books are kind of the most official ones that you can get. If you don't know, to what extent means how much. Do you agree fully? Do you disagree fully? Maybe do you partly agree and partly disagree? That's fine too. Now, what I usually do at this point of the video is I tell you to look through the essay, which here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slides, and the band descriptors, which are 1, 2 slides. And that obviously really depends on the device that you're using. If you're using a tiny phone screen, it's a bit less convenient. But, if you can, this is what I recommend. So I'll give you a chance now to pause the video on each slide so you can think about what kind of scores you would give this, which is what I'm going to do together with you at the end. It's just a good exercise to see how much your estimated scores match up with mine. Anyway, this is the first slide if you want to pause the video. This is the second. The third. The fourth. The fifth and final of the essay. Band descriptors for the highest scores and for the lower ones. Okay, now here's the part where we'll start to look at this together. Although there are arguments that says if a country develops its technology, the traditions will disappear and it's unnecessary to make an effort to protect them, I disagree with this idea. We'll talk about this a bit more later, but I should just mention that when you write your introduction, a single sentence might be okay for task 1, but for task 2, it's really an introductory paragraph, not an introductory sentence. So, is there a clear argument made? Yes. Some people believe this, but I disagree. So it's got the most important thing, which is a kind of clear argument or signpost in the direction that the essay is going to go. Taking the reader on a journey. This is what I'm going to talk about. This is what I'm going to argue. So you might wonder, if it has that, what's the problem? Well, the problem is it just kind of suddenly jumps into the main point. Like, let's say there's an argument about child labor, which is children working. It's kind of just, to me, this start, it just seems a bit similar to, starting like child labor is wrong. Child labor is wrong. It's not really setting the scene, if you know what that means, setting the scene. You've got to build up to your argument. And when you talk about the sentence giving your argument, it's often called a thesis statement. Thesis just means argument. But that shouldn't be the first thing. It should be the second thing. And the first thing should be a kind of build-up to that. So you give some, let's say, context or background. So at the beginning, before this, I would just add something like, something very general, like society is changing at a rapid pace due to the inexorable march of technology. I'm trying to show off with some fancy words, the inexorable march of technology. So I'm just talking about the fast pace of change in technology, of technology. I guess I could talk about lifestyles as well as technology. But I guess they're kind of interconnected, aren't they? Like if you use a smartphone, it's going to change your lifestyle because your use of the phone will involve quite dramatic changes, or more generally, people's use of smartphones involve quite dramatic changes compared to how people used to live, 30 or 40 years ago. So, anyway, as for any errors, well, it's arguments that say seems like a bit of an odd word to use here anyway. Arguments that argue, I guess, but arguments that claim, but it's not really necessary to have anything. Although there are arguments that if a country develops its technology, the traditions will disappear. Maybe its traditions will disappear, and it's unnecessary to make an effort to protect them. I disagree with this idea. Now you can see that it's very developed, the essay. So it seems a bit strange that the conclusion here and the introduction here are so short. But what I guess happened, and this can actually be a good way to deal with the essay, is the body paragraphs were written first, and the writer was running out of time, so they just kind of quickly added, quickly tacked on an introduction and conclusion in the last minute or two. That's all I can guess, given how well developed the body paragraphs are. Anyway, moving on. To begin with, there are arguments that it's worthless to try and keep traditional skills and ways of life, perhaps because they believe that developing technology is more crucial. Worthless isn't quite the right word. I can understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to paraphrase pointless. But again, thinking about the idea of how change is inevitable with regard to technology, that inexorable march of technology I mentioned, it's not really worthless. It might have some value, but more it's futile. The change is inevitable. The change is unavoidable. Futile means your efforts won't work. It's not going to work. So it's futile to try to keep traditional skills and ways of life. Perhaps because they believe that developing technology is more crucial. Yeah, again, I might say because the development of technology generally results in improvements to our quality of life. And, ameliorates or improves our lifestyles. But it's not really a big deal, so we'll move on. keep them alive is better than keep. Keep alive means prevent them from dying out. But keep phrases are a bit informal, so it's okay in the question, but not so much in your answer. Retain, preserve. Something like that might be good. Perhaps because they, who is they? The previous sentences there are arguments. It doesn't say people make arguments, so who is they? I guess I'll have to change it to passive. It is believed by people. Perhaps because it's believed that developing technology is more crucial. One of the main causes of what? Causes of an argument? I do not understand. So I'm going to change that. I don't get can be either. One of the main issues just is. You could say could be, might be, but it's not very persuasive, is it, if you're not even very confident in your own argument? So one of the main issues is that traditional ways are often seen to be outdated. We don't usually say seen to be. We say considered to be. We usually say seen as, viewed as. So seen as or considered to be. It's not a big problem, so it's black rather than red, because I have heard seen to be occasionally, but it's usually viewed as, seen as. So, not my red pen. Red pen is the big things. This means that keeping them may appear like that particular country is not developed, but rather only keeping unnecessary skills. It's okay. Another reason can be that many people think that developing technology should be focused on rather than keeping traditional habits, since both require a lot of money and time. Should be focused on is grammatically quite nice, because it's understanding that you move the preposition to the end and it's using passive. It might be a bit smoother to write should be our focus, or our main focus, our main priority. But because the grammar's so nice, I'm not going to worry too much about that. And again, not really keeping, but going to use nominalization, the of, quite academic style, the preservation of. The preservation of traditional habits, since both require a lot of money and time. A lot of is quite informal, since these are uncountable nouns, a great deal of. Therefore, it is said that it is worthless to keep traditional habits. Sometimes said that maintaining long-standing practices has little value. Well, I'm going to change this. I'll change it first and then tell you why I've changed it. So I'm not going to make a new sentence. I'm just going to add to the previous sentence. But prioritizing the former Z or S here, it doesn't matter, American or British. Prioritizing the former results in more or greater economic growth. What does the former mean? The first one mentioned, which is developing technology, not the latter one, which is traditional habits. Prioritizing, treating as more important. So why have I changed that? Well, I changed that because I feel that the writer's building up to a point. Outdated traditional methods. Seems like a particular country is not developing and is actually focusing on retaining unnecessary skills at the expense of development. But then I think the ending seems quite random. If you're focusing on the preservation of traditional skills and traditional technology at the expense of development, I assume it means economic development. It could be development in terms of efficiency, but usually in this context it would suggest economic development. So I just want to build on that in a way that seems natural and kind of flows, so results in more economic growth. Again, specific examples would help. The writers in South Korea, which used to be a very poor country in the 1950s and 60s, and then became one of the leading economies of the world in only a few decades, and that's through companies like Samsung. Samsung making smartphones, which are definitely not seen as traditional things. So it's quite easy just to develop the point in a more clear and persuasive and cohesive way. Okay, so in opposition, so we got an issue straight away. In opposition means against, like people in opposition to child labour or people who don't support child labour. Nevertheless, I'm going to use something for concession. That's the right word, yeah, concession. When we say things like regardless, nevertheless, nonetheless, we're kind of considering the other side of the argument a bit. So nevertheless, in my view, while it's true that developing new technology is important, protecting traditional skills is also vital for a country. It's pretty good. Except for the first thing. First of all, traditional habits are simply old history which should be forgotten. They are part of a culture of a specific country. It sounds like speaking style. They're not just this, they're this. Grammatically, for writing, I think we need to add something, not this, but rather, but instead they are more this thing. So cohesion kind of drops a bit there. For instance, if every Korean stopped making kimchi in a traditional way and bought kimchi which is produced in factories, like mass-produced in factories, then Koreans would become more ignorant about their culture and traditional ways of living. That's pretty good. And I like now that it's giving a detailed example. As we said, maybe the previous part was lacking. Consequently, in the future, not many Koreans would know that their ancestors produced kimchi at their own houses with the whole family, which is not a good phenomenon since they might forget their own culture. This could be better. So, good is not an academic word. Phenomenon is some garbage word which is really overused by writers. I've used it myself a couple of times, but it's very limited when you talk about phenomenon. Like natural phenomenon might be how I use it. Like talking about the aurora borealis, the northern lights, is an amazing natural phenomenon. So let's change this. I'm going to be more careful with the language, because it says might here, so it's not definitely going to happen, but there could be negative consequences, perhaps. So which could be a negative development, a negative change, a negative development. since they might forget their own culture. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, I would think of higher level language myself. Like if you talk about cultural erosion, that kind of is a phenomenon, something that happens in society when cultures gradually are lost. Erosion, worn down, like soil erosion. Cultural erosion, the culture is lost, worn down. Second of all, well, we do say first of all, but we don't usually say second of all. We're here now. Not every traditional skill is old-fashioned. Kind of short sentence, but okay, as long as there are long ones too. It might take a little extra time and effort to use traditional skills, but they sometimes result in better quality products compared to factories. Big and little are very informal words. So that's more like speaking style. So it might take a little extra time. Well, how about just it might take more time and effort to use traditional skills. But so I guess that means traditional skills, they sometimes result in better quality products compared to factories. Yeah, better's okay, but again, make it a little bit better. Higher quality products. I mean, better and higher, they're comparative adjectives. They go with than, don't they? Better than, higher than. So I could say high quality products compared to those produced in factories, but higher than. Higher quality products than those mass-produced, than those products mass-produced in factories or by factories. Therefore, if traditional skills were wiped out is kind of informal, isn't it? A lot of these phrasal verbs are, not all of them, like point out is okay, but wipe out. I'm just going to say replaced. I could say lost, but they're being replaced by modern methods, I suppose. If traditional skills were replaced, there would be a large population who do not know their own culture and a decrease in the quality of some products. A large population, well, a large part of the population. If you say a large population, it's more like for research, like you do drug tests on different populations. I'm going to change it. There would be large, I'm going to say swathes, big groups of people, large swathes of the population, parts of the population, who do not know, well, not understand maybe, who are, but I can just skip who are, large swathes of the population unaware of their own culture. And there would also be a decrease in the quality of some products. Yeah. Kimchi was given as an example of certain products. Well, culture, I'm going to use the word heritage. Heritage is everything that should be passed on to the next generation. So it's more about the culture being lost over time through cultural erosion. Whereas receiving heritage is often argued to be the birthright of, future generations. They have a right to receive these because it helps with things like their sense of national identity, for example. It's conducive to developing a clear sense of national identity, so you can't really take it away from the next generation. You don't have the right to. So I'm going to use the word heritage. In summary, it seems to me that traditions of a particular country should be kept alive since they're directly connected to their country's culture, and they may result in better quality products than machinery since they require more efforts. Make a few changes. The traditions of a particular country, so specific ones for a particular country, should be kept alive. Well, you can change the words retained, conserved, since they are directly connected to that particular country's culture, and they may result in better quality products. I'm going to change the words because we've had similar words before. And artisans, so experts at making things by hand, artisans may produce products superior in quality to ones made by machinery, which is uncountable. One superior in quality to let's just get rid of this. Effort is uncountable usually to machine-produced ones. So ones, products it refers to. So what did I give this? I don't know about you, but I gave this very consistent scores of 7 overall and 7 for each. Let's look at 7 and 8. I'll tell you why 7, not 8 at times. Task response. 8 would be a well-developed response to a question with relevant, extended, and supported ideas. I thought it actually did do that. Look at all this stuff about kimchi, which is very, very clear. Makes me understand exactly what argument they wish to make. Does it have a... Sorry, let me zoom in. Does it have a well-developed response to the question? So yes, it does for 8, but does it sufficiently address all parts of the task? I don't think it does. That's why I gave it 7. Got to remind myself of the question. So when a country develops its technology, well, I talked about factories, mass production, so thinking about conveyor belt systems and that kind of thing. Traditional skills and ways of life die out. Yep, that was talked about. What I remember thinking when I read this is the idea of pointless or futile, to use the word that I gave you before. If you try to keep them alive, it won't work. So the idea about innovation in technology being inevitable because it improves society, it makes everything more efficient, it improves our quality of life. I don't think that was really talked about, and that's the reason why I gave this 7 and not 8. Everything else was a bit clearer for me, so 7 for coherence and cohesion. Logically organizes information and ideas, yes. Clear progression throughout, yes. Range of cohesive devices, yes. Clear central topic for each paragraph. pretty much. But for 8, uses paragraph sufficiently and appropriately. Well, conclusion's very short, even though it does recap the main points to an extent, like high quality products being mentioned again. And the introduction's very limited, as we talked about. What's next? Lexical resource. Why did I give it 7? Sufficient range of vocabulary, some flexibility and precision. Definitely. Less common lexical items, definitely. Like machinery, even though the countability issue wasn't right. It's a good word to use. Ignorant, that's nice. A little bit repetitive ways of living, lifestyles, we could say. Other good words, vital. Ancestors. It's just, quite nice, my overall feel. So why didn't I give it 8? Well, this is a wide range of vocabulary. No, not really. As I said, ways of life is repeated. The writer didn't really think about what ways of life means. Ways of life, lifestyles, isn't it? Fluently and flexibly to convey precise meanings at times, but not always. Some uncommon lexical items. So overall it's going to be 7 and not 8. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy. Variety of complex structures, yes. Frequent error-free sentences, yes. Good control, despite a few errors, yes. That's for 7. As for 8, the majority of sentences are error-free. Well, taking a look at the essay again, most are, not the vast majority. Very occasional errors or inappropriacies. It's kind of 7 or 8 borderline. I mean, mostly I just felt that there could be a more kind of daring range of structures using a kind of wider variety of different structures. But there was lots of good stuff there. There were many complex sentences. And for me, it would be 7 or 8. Borderline, really. But it doesn't matter because the overall would be 7 either way. Anyway, that's all from me. I wonder if you agree with me or if you came up with different scores. And please feel free to comment on the video and discuss to what extent you agree with my judgment on this. Thank you very much, as always, for listening and watching. Bye-bye.